My best friend kept flirting with me for months. When I finally confessed, she laughed in my face. The sheer devastation of that memory still hits me like a physical punch, even now. Chloe and I were inseparable. We had been since the sophomore year of college when we got paired for a biochemistry lab that involved handling extremely volatile compounds. The potential for disaster was high, but our synergy was immediate. We just clicked, spending the next 4 years attached at the hip. After graduation, the universe seemed to conspire to keep us together. We both secured entry-level marketing jobs in the same bustling city, our apartments only about 3 miles apart. Everything was comfortable, predictable, and totally platonic for years. She was my person, the one I called when I got a promotion, the one I vented to after a bad date, the one who knew exactly how much cream and sugar I needed in my coffee. I genuinely believed we had the healthiest, most stable friendship either of us would ever have. Then, about 8 months ago, the dynamic started to subtly shift. It was almost imperceptible at first, like a slow tilt of the Earth's axis. It started with the daily morning texts, not just hey, but good morning, handsome, followed by the heart symbol. Just one usually, but then there were 2, then 3, but then there were 2, then 3. I rationalized it. She was Chloe, she was affectionate with everyone. But the signals escalated in ways that were impossible to ignore. She started finding these tiny, constant excuses to touch me. Walking through the crowded bar doors, her hand would rest firmly on my lower back for just a second too long. If my hair was mussed, she'd gently fix it, letting her fingers graze my cheekbone. She stopped calling me dude or T and switched to beautiful, which was ridiculous, but she'd deliver it with a look that made my stomach flip. When we watched a movie at her place, she'd pull me close to lean against her, often playing with the hair just above my ear for what felt like hours. I specifically remember one night watching a marathon of a fantasy show, and she spent an entire episode tracing small, deliberate circles on my thigh. When I looked down, then up at her face, her expression was soft and smiling, and she just kept going, never breaking the contact. My roommate Noah noticed it all. Noah was a loyal friend, but he had a highly tuned BS detector. Travis, the girl is basically leaving a breadcrumb trail straight into your bedroom. He joked one evening while I was agonizing over a text message from her. I'd always push back, making excuses. No, man. She's just naturally affectionate. You know how she is. I don't want to read it wrong and ruin the best thing in my life. But deep down, the hope was a hot, terrifying lump in my chest. The signals were becoming less like breadcrumbs and more like flashing neon signs. The escalation continued. She started buying me random, expensive gifts, a leather briefcase for work, high-end cologne, tickets to a show she knew I loved but insisted on paying for herself. Our hangouts turned into elaborate, undeniable dates, reservations at romantic, dimly lit restaurants where she'd fight me to pay the entire check. One night she drunk called me at 2 in the morning, her voice thick and slurry. She wasn't making sense, but the central message was clear. She missed my voice and said she needed to hear it before she could possibly fall asleep. Another time, at a mutual friend's engagement party, she gave a toast, and she paused, staring right at me as she announced I was the most important person in her entire life. It was a gesture of overwhelming intimacy. She even introduced me to her new colleague as my guy, before quickly laughing and correcting herself to just my best friend. The final, undeniable moment happened just last month. I'd had a truly terrible day at the office where I felt professionally shredded. I didn't even text her about it, but somehow she knew. She showed up at my apartment door, holding a bouquet of dark red roses. Not the kind you buy at the grocery store, but the kind you order from a professional florist. She held me in the doorway for 20 minutes, my face buried in her hair, and she whispered that everything would be okay because she would always take care of me. That night, lying in bed, I knew I couldn't be a coward anymore. The signals were too loud, too clear. Even the ride-share driver who dropped her off had commented, "Your girlfriend seems really in love with you." I decided I had to tell her how I felt. The emotional guardedness I'd built for years felt like it was dissolving under the weight of her obvious affection. I was finally ready to risk everything for her. The plan was simple. I would make her favorite meal, spicy Thai curry, which was complicated but worth the effort. I'd set the mood, and after dinner, I would finally ask. I would finally confront the terrifying, beautiful hope she had planted in my heart. The anticipation made my hands shake. I was going to risk rejection, but I felt a quiet confidence, certain that this time, after all the touching and the gifts and the intimate words, the answer was going to be yes. That confidence was the heaviest weight I carried into the dinner, a feeling I wouldn't experience again for months after the words finally left my mouth. That quiet confidence was a heavy weight I carried into the dinner, a feeling I wouldn't experience again for months after the words left my mouth. After 8 months of signals, of late-night calls and lingering touches, I'd finally decided to risk everything. I spent the entire afternoon preparing the spicy Thai curry, measuring out every spice with the precision of a chemist, trying to control the uncontrollable anticipation buzzing beneath my skin. Chloe arrived right on time, full of her usual bright, effortless energy. She complimented the aroma of the curry, and the first part of the evening felt like the best of our friendship. Easy, funny, completely natural. We talked about her new client, a messy project at my office, and the terrible movie we'd watched last week. It was all so normal, but for me, every laugh, every shared glance, was layered with the terrifying weight of what I was about to say. Once the plates were cleared, and we were sitting on the couch, the moment arrived. I had rehearsed the words 100 times, aiming for honesty without being overly dramatic. I took a deep breath. Chloe, I need to be completely honest with you. I started, trying to keep my voice steady. Lately, the last few months, you've been acting differently. With the gifts, the way you touch me, and the things you say. I know we've always been best friends, but those things, they've made me realize something. I've developed feelings for you. Romantic feelings. I looked at her, my heart hammering against my ribs, waiting for the soft confirmation I'd convinced myself was coming. I waited for her to smile, to reach out, to confirm that all the subtle intimacy she'd initiated was leading to this. Instead, a flicker of confusion crossed her face, and then, slowly, a wide, disbelieving grin spread across her mouth. She didn't say anything for a beat. Then she threw her head back and burst out laughing. It wasn't a nervous chuckle. It wasn't the relieved laughter of someone whose unspoken feelings had finally been reciprocated. It was a genuine, full-bellied laugh, the kind of laugh you let out when someone tells a truly hilarious, completely absurd joke. I sat there, frozen, watching her wipe a tear from the corner of her eye. The silence after her laughter died was agonizing. It felt like the entire world had stopped spinning, and I was pinned beneath the sound of her amusement. "Wait, Travis," she gasped, trying to catch her breath. "Are you serious? You actually think I was flirting with you?" She laughed again, a smaller, more contained sound this time, but still infused with genuine humor. My face felt hot with shame. I opened my mouth to defend myself, to list the incidents, the hand on my thigh, the late-night call, the roses, but she cut me off, her expression shifting from amusement to a kind of baffled pity. "Travis, you must be confused," she said, her voice dripping with a condescending sweetness that was worse than any anger. "I was just being a good friend. You completely misread everything. I mean, I think of you like a little brother." She actually used the word "thus delusional." She said that the idea of us being together was hilarious and kind of gross. Every word was a razor blade. She explained that the touching and the expensive gifts were just her way of being affectionate and supportive. "You shouldn't assume every girl who's nice wants to date you, Travis. That's kind of a huge ego move." The sheer audacity of her statement, after 8 months of intentional ambiguity, left me speechless. I watched her gather her coat and purse, still chuckling softly about how awkward I had made things. She kissed me lightly on the cheek, a final, sisterly gesture, before she walked out the door, leaving me alone in the apartment reeking of Thai curry and fresh humiliation. I didn't move for an hour. The shock had frozen me. Then the humiliation set in, heavy and sickening. I sat there and cried, not the quiet tears of sadness, but the desperate, ugly sobs of a man whose deepest secret hope had been mocked. The next 2 days were a blur. I called in sick, barely leaving my room. No covered for me. Telling people I had a bad flu. I couldn't function. I kept replaying the scene, the look on her face, the sound of that belly laugh. You don't laugh at someone you care about. You don't call them delusional. You certainly don't treat someone you see as a brother that way. The grief lasted 48 hours, but on the morning of the third day, the pain solidified into something else, a cold, hard knot of rage. You don't act like that with someone you see as a sister. It was manipulative, cowardly, and deliberately cruel. In that moment, sitting in the gloom of my apartment, I resolved that I was done being the humiliated best friend. I decided I was going to show Chloe exactly what she had thrown away. I didn't want closure, I didn't want apologies. I wanted her to feel the exact, devastating kind of loss she had inflicted on me. I wanted perfect revenge. I knew exactly what she had thrown away, and I decided to make sure she felt the exact same, devastating kind of loss. The first step of the revenge plot was simple, clean and brutal, complete radio silence. No explanation, no dramatic final text, no angry message. I just stopped responding. The first text from Chloe arrived within 12 hours. It was a nervous, casual message asking if I was okay, saying she was worried because I hadn't returned her jacket. I left her on read. Then the calls started, 6 in the first week. Each one I ignored, watching the screen light up with her name, feeling a cold, satisfying knot of power replace the agonizing shame. She even showed up at my apartment one evening. I had Noah tell her I wasn't home, even though my car was parked 20 feet away, clearly visible from the street. While she was starting to freak out about the sudden, complete erasure of her best friend, I started building the new, improved Travis. This new version would be everything she was too blind or too cowardly to want. I joined a boxing gym, throwing myself into the physical exhaustion until my muscles screamed, using the sharp, clear memory of her laughter as fuel. I hadn't realized how much physical fitness I'd let slide while being preoccupied with our relationship, but within weeks, I was in the best shape of my life. I overhauled my wardrobe, opting for the expensive, confident cuts I'd always been too self-conscious to wear. I threw myself into my marketing job with a focused intensity I hadn't possessed before, not for ambition, but for spite. My boss noticed, and I volunteered for high-level projects. The work paid off immediately. I landed a massive client that the senior team had been pursuing for months. The subsequent promotion was genuine, a real accomplishment I'd earned, but even that felt secondary to the main mission. But the real, visible tool of my revenge was Sarah Jensen. I met Sarah at the boxing gym. She was a personal trainer there, incredibly successful, beautiful, and utterly genuine. She had this frank, clear way of speaking that cut through pretense. I was drawn to her instantly, and the feeling seemed to be mutual. I started dating Sarah with a deliberate, calculating focus. I genuinely liked her, but I was consciously molding the relationship into the perfect public display. She was the polar opposite of my painful history with Chloe. Sarah was direct, honest, and completely obsessed with me in a way that left absolutely no room for mixed signals. I subtly guided our hangouts to places I knew Chloe frequented or places we'd gone together. And Sarah, thankfully, was a massive fan of public acknowledgement. She posted about me constantly, calling me her dream man, sharing pictures of us looking impossibly happy and successful. I made sure to tag her in places where our mutual friends, and thus Chloe, would see. The reaction was immediate and intoxicating. The desperation in Chloe's texts escalated. They were no longer casual inquiries. They were long, messy, and apologetic. She tried reaching out to our mutual friend group, saying she missed me and didn't understand what had happened. Our friend Liam told me that Chloe kept asking about Sarah, specifically how serious we were and whether I was really happy. Then, she started actively pursuing me. It wasn't just happenstance, it was calculated. She'd show up at the coffee shop I went to every Saturday morning, pretending to be surprised. She even started coming to my boxing gym, lingering in the lobby until the front desk staff had to tell her she needed a membership to keep loitering. Each time she'd try to approach me, a hesitant smile, a hand reaching out. I'd act like she was utterly invisible, my attention focused entirely on Sarah, who would hold my arm tighter, utterly oblivious to the drama she was a centerpiece of. The sight of her confusion, her raw, visible distress, was a rush of pure adrenaline. It was the validation I'd craved, the proof that I wasn't delusional, that I was, in fact, desirable and valuable. The deep, hot shame of her laughter was being slowly burned away by the performance of my new, perfect life. I was watching the architect of my humiliation crumble, and it gave me a fierce, intoxicating sense of empowerment. The stage was set for the final act of this carefully orchestrated drama, and I knew exactly how I would deliver the perfect, devastating payoff. My revenge was working, her panic was my fuel. But the true test, the moment I'd been rehearsing in my head for weeks, was still ahead. I wanted to hear the words, and I wanted to destroy them. The chance came at a mutual friend's house party. Sarah and I arrived late, making an entrance that was calculated to be both understated and impossible to miss. We were laughing at a private joke, and I felt the eyes of everyone in the room turn toward us. Chloe was talking to a small group near the kitchen. When she saw me, her conversation trailed off and her expression tightened, a mixture of pain and frustration that I drank in like expensive champagne. I spent the next hour performing happiness with Sarah. We stayed close, our conversation animated, our connection seemingly unbreakable. I made sure to laugh extra loud, to lean into Sarah's space, to showcase the kind of open, easy intimacy that Chloe had cruelly mocked months earlier. Chloe kept glancing over, her posture rigid, watching me be happier than I had ever been when I was with her. The moment came when Sarah went to get drinks. She kissed me quickly and squeezed my hand before walking toward the bar. Before I could move away, Chloe was there, stepping into the space Sarah had just vacated. "Travis, can we please talk? For 5 minutes," she pleaded, her voice low and frantic. The confident, laughing girl who had called me delusional was gone, replaced by someone desperate and small. I kept my face neutral, forcing myself to look slightly bored. "About what, Chloe? We don't really have anything to talk about." "I made a mistake," she whispered, her eyes wide and wet. "A huge, terrible mistake. I realize it now. Seeing you with someone else, being happy like this, it finally made me understand what I threw away. The friendship, the chance for something more. I was a coward, Travis. I was terrified." She tried to reach for my hand, her fingers hovering near my arm. "I do have feelings for you. I did then too. I just panicked and ruined everything. I know it sounds crazy, but please, we could start over. We could try." In that moment, everything snapped into place. The 8 months of mixed signals, the humiliation in my apartment, the lonely tears on my bathroom floor. It all distilled into a single, overwhelming sensation of righteous power. She was confessing. She was begging. She was admitting I hadn't been delusional. The revenge was complete. I looked her dead in the eye. The sound I made was a single, cold bark of laughter. The sound came out sharper and higher than I expected, almost mean, and it cut through the low background noise of the party. It wasn't the joyous sound of my own laughter. It was a cold, pure replication of the sound she had made that night I confessed. I watched her face in exacting detail. It went from hopeful to confused to deeply, profoundly hurt in about 3 seconds. She flinched, stepping back as if I had physically slapped her, and her hand dropped from where it had been reaching for mine. "You really thought I would forget that night?" I asked, my voice flat and devoid of emotion. "You laughed in my face, Chloe. You called me gross. You told me I was delusional. I was your best friend, and you treated me like a joke." She tried to protest, her eyes filling with tears. "But, Travis," I just explained. "I don't care about your explanation." I cut her off, my tone icy. "I care that you see me thriving, and now you want back in. That's not love, Chloe. That's just a fear of loss. And I'm not responsible for that anymore. You threw me away. You don't get a chance to regret it publicly." I turned my back on her without another word and walked back to Sarah, who was just returning with 2 drinks. I plastered a triumphant smile on my face and took the glass from her. Sarah, sensing the tension, simply squeezed my shoulder. I didn't look back, but I felt the weight of her presence, standing alone in the crowded living room while people pretended not to stare. The drive home felt amazing. I replayed the moment over and over in my head, how her face had crumpled when I laughed, how small and desperate she had looked. I told Sarah every detail, and she said I had handled it perfectly, that Chloe deserved exactly what she got after humiliating me. We got back to my apartment, and I couldn't stop talking about it, describing Chloe's expression again and again while Sarah held me and agreed that the whole thing was perfect revenge. But even as I savored the victory, a strange, cold emptiness began to creep in around the edges. The satisfaction was intense, but it was fleeting. I had won, but I didn't feel healed. In fact, 3 days later, something felt profoundly off. I kept checking my phone, expecting another panicked text from Chloe. I refreshed her social media, which was strangely silent. I started scrolling back through our old photos together, zooming in on her face, trying to read something I had missed, wondering why the perfect revenge hadn't brought the promised peace. The silence on my phone was louder than any of Chloe's desperate texts. My perfect revenge was starting to look like a desperate performance. The high of laughing in her face had evaporated, leaving behind a profound, uncomfortable stillness. I couldn't stop thinking about her reaction, but not in the triumphant way I had expected. I was obsessed with the fact that she was no longer reacting. I found myself scrolling back through her old photos, zooming in on pictures of us from months ago, searching her captions, trying to decipher if I'd missed some clue to her current silence. Sarah came over Tuesday night and caught me staring at a photo of Chloe and me at the beach from last summer. I locked my phone fast and stammered that I was just scrolling randomly. She didn't look convinced, but she let it drop. I knew I was using Sarah as a human shield against the complicated emotions Chloe triggered, and I was terrified of Sarah realizing it. The external world, however, started reflecting the internal chaos I was trying to mask. Noah, my perceptive roommate, was the first to call me out. Thursday morning, I woke up to 47 desperate, apologetic texts from Chloe. They were long, explaining that she had been thinking, that she realized her mistake, that she understood why I hated her, and asking to please just talk. I screenshot every one, labeling them with comments like, "Look at her begging," and "This is pathetic," and I sent them to Noah. I expected him to laugh with me, to validate my victory. Instead, Noah responded with one question. "Are you really okay, or are you just performing being okay for me?" The question hit me with surprising force, and I was instantly defensive. I texted back that I was great, better than ever, demanding to know why he would ask that. He responded with 3 dots for a full minute before finally writing, "You're obsessing, Trav. This isn't closure, it's a fixation. The revenge is over. Why are you still on the phone?" I didn't respond to Noah for the rest of the day. Then Sarah confronted me. We were at dinner Friday, and I kept checking my phone, not for texts, but refreshing social media feeds. She watched me put my fork down for the 3rd time and asked directly, "Are you actually over Chloe, or am I just the convenient timing?" I started to protest vehemently, telling her that was ridiculous. That of course I cared about her. But she held up her hand, stopping me. I know I was a rebound, Travis. I accepted that. But I can't keep being a prop in your drama. I saw you looking at her photos, and you've been checking her social media and location history twice a day for the past week. I know you've been engineering run-ins with her. I deserve better than being a character in your revenge fantasy. I felt my mouth go dry. My attempts to argue failed because she was absolutely right. The words I used to reassure her sounded hollow even to my own ears. I insisted I genuinely cared about her, but a part of me knew I had been waiting this whole time for Chloe to realize what she'd lost. And now that it was happening, I couldn't stop focusing on her reaction. The final, most painful confrontation came from Luke, a neutral friend in our group. We were at a casual gathering the following weekend. I was making an effort to be excessively affectionate with Sarah, laughing loudly at her jokes, putting on a show. Luke followed me into the kitchen when I went to refill my drink and quietly closed the door. "Are you proud of yourself, Travis?" he asked, his voice low and serious. I stared blankly. "I don't know what you mean. Everyone knows exactly what you're doing. Parading Sarah around specifically to hurt Chloe, making sure she sees how happy you are without her. The whole friend group is uncomfortable watching you weaponize a genuinely good person just to get revenge." My face flushed hot. "She humiliated me, Luke. She deserves to see me doing better." Luke shook his head slowly. "You're not doing better. You're being cruel to someone who was your best friend for years. What she did was wrong, it was cowardly, but that doesn't make what you're doing now any less manipulative. Honestly, watching this has made me realize you're capable of being just as cruel as Chloe was when you want to be." The accusation hit me like a punch to the gut. I stumbled out of the kitchen, grabbing Sarah immediately and saying we had to go. The external crisis reached its head when the focus bled into the one place I thought I was safe: my job. I'd been throwing myself into work, But it was out of frantic distraction, not focus. I'd missed deadlines and had become distracted in meetings. My mentor, the highly respected Dr. Cooper, pulled me into her office Wednesday. "Travis, your performance has noticeably declined over the past 2 weeks," she stated, her expression a mix of concern and disappointment. "You missed deliverables that aren't like you at all. I was incredibly impressed with the massive client win last month, and we were discussing the next promotion. But I need to see consistent performance again before we can revisit that discussion. Is everything okay at home?" The question hit me hard. I realized I was actively destroying the professional success I had earned through genuine effort, all because I was obsessed with making one person regret their choices. I had been so focused on performing victory for Chloe that I was letting my real life fall apart. The cost of the revenge was higher than I was willing to admit. The perfect performance was cracking, and I felt the cold fear that I was losing control of the narrative, and more importantly, losing control of myself. All the walls I had built were cracking, and the foundation I thought was solid. My career and my new relationship was crumbling. After the uncomfortable conversation with my mentor, I spent the rest of the week trying to pull myself together, but the distraction was chronic. My concentration had dissolved into a constant, anxious fixation on Chloe, on Sarah, and on the terrifying judgment of my friends. Maya's birthday party was that Friday, and I seriously debated faking a sudden, debilitating illness. The thought of seeing Chloe again, of maintaining that rigid, painful performance of indifference while our entire social circle watched us nervously, made my stomach clench. But Maya had been my friend since college, and skipping her birthday because of what Luke called boy drama felt like an admission of defeat. So I showed up at her apartment with Sarah, carrying a bottle of wine and a smile that felt like it was glued on too tightly. Chloe was already there, sitting on a sectional talking to Luke. When I walked in, their conversation stopped instantly. I could feel the energy in the room drop, the collective discomfort of 20 people waiting for something to explode, or worse, something to remain awkwardly silent. I walked past Chloe without looking directly at her, grabbed Maya, and gave her an extra tight hug, which she returned with a whispered plea for maturity. For the next 2 hours, Chloe and I maintained a stiff, almost inhuman politeness. We managed to be in the same conversation circle talking about Maya's new job, laughing at the same joke, but it was exhausting. I spent the entire time clinging to Sarah, talking over the people next to me, ensuring that Chloe knew I was totally fine, totally moved on, totally happy. But every nerve ending was tuned to her presence across the room. I felt her watching me, and the performance only ramped up the tension, never relieving it. I left early, around 10 o'clock, claiming a headache that was entirely true. I said goodbye to Maya and was halfway down the hallway toward the elevator when I heard footsteps behind me. "Travis," it was Chloe. I stopped but didn't turn around immediately, needing a second to steel myself. She caught up to me, looking tired and uncomfortable under the fluorescent hallway lights. "Can we please just talk like adults?" she asked, her voice low. "I know you're mad, and you have every right to be, but this tension is killing me and it's killing our friends too. I think we need to clear the air for real. Not at a party. Not with Sarah there. Somewhere neutral." The sheer exhaustion of the last few weeks settled over me. I was tired of the performance, tired of the anger, tired of everyone watching us like we were characters in a drama they were all secretly invested in. And shamefully, part of me still missed my best friend. Despite everything that had happened, I finally turned to face her. "Fine," I said, my voice flat. "Tuesday afternoon, that cafe near your office." She nodded quickly, relieved. "Thank you, Travis." She looked like she wanted to say more, but she just turned and hurried back toward the apartment door. I walked toward the elevator and pressed the button. Chloe went back inside, and I heard the apartment door close behind her. I stood there, waiting for the elevator to arrive, pulling out my phone to call a ride share. Maya's apartment was on the 3rd floor, and the living room window was open to the warm night air. I could hear voices drifting down from above. I froze on the sidewalk, my thumb hovering over the ride-share app. It was Chloe's voice, carrying clearly. She was talking to Luke. "He has every right to be angry at me," she was saying. "He absolutely deserves the public humiliation because of how cruel my rejection was. I know that, Luke said something low and indistinct. Chloe responded, her voice thick with emotion, sounding like she was fighting back tears. Watching him happy with someone else hurts, yes. But it's not about what I deserve. It's about what he deserved after I treated him so badly. I was a coward, Luke. I was a jerk. I laughed in his face when he confessed. He was my best friend, and I threw that away because I was too scared to be honest. Her voice cracked slightly on the last word. I stood there on the sidewalk, unable to move, feeling a terrifying swell of something that wasn't hatred. The hatred felt clean and simple. This raw, self-aware vulnerability that radiated from her confession felt complicated and messy. I had wanted her to suffer, but I had wanted her to understand her own cruelty even more. And now that she did, my entire foundation for revenge shattered. Sarah came over the next night, and I knew what was coming. She showed up with Thai food, and we ate in near silence. After we finished, she put down her fork and looked at me directly. "I need to know," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "I need to know if this relationship is real or just convenient timing." I started to argue, but she held up her hand. "I've known the whole time you were using me for revenge, Travis. Your friend, Noah, let it slip weeks ago. I stayed because I hoped you'd eventually actually see me as a person instead of a tool." My defensive protests died in my throat. "I can't wait around anymore while you work through your Chloe issues," she finished, standing up and grabbing her jacket. "You deserve better than being someone's revenge fantasy, Travis. And honestly, I deserve better too. You deserve to actually deal with what happened instead of using me as a shield." She left quietly. No yelling, no dramatic door slam, just gone. The sheer, terrifying rightness of her words hung in the air, leaving me standing alone in the kitchen with the remains of a relationship I had carefully constructed and then utterly destroyed. Sarah was gone, and her departure was quiet, respectful, and devastatingly right. The truth of her words was ringing in my ears, making every defensive argument I had prepared sound like a lie I was only telling myself. I didn't chase her. There was nothing left to say, because she had said it all for me. I made it to the bathroom before I completely fell apart. I sat down on the cold tile floor and started hyperventilating. My chest felt tight, a sharp, physical pain, and my hands were shaking violently. I suddenly saw myself clearly for the first time in months, stripped of the armor of spite and the illusion of control. I had manipulated a genuinely good person, Sarah, the exact same way Chloe had manipulated me with mixed signals and false hope. I had used Sarah's real, genuine feelings for me to hurt someone else. I'd turned her kindness and her sincerity into a weapon for a fight that wasn't hers. The realization that I had become exactly what I hated in Chloe, mean, calculating, and willing to use people for my own emotional gain, made me physically ill. I leaned over the toilet, but nothing came out. I just sat there on the bathroom floor, crying and gasping for air, the cold tiles pressing against my skin. I spent nearly an hour there, confronting the horrific fact that being hurt doesn't justify hurting other people on purpose. Revenge doesn't fix anything. It only doubles the casualties. I had wasted months of my life obsessing over making Chloe regret her choices while actively becoming someone unrecognizable. Someone who threw away professional success and a real relationship just to win a petty, toxic game. My shaking wouldn't stop. I felt completely exposed and contaminated by my own actions. Noah found me there around 11 o'clock. He'd let himself in with his spare key when I didn't answer his repeated texts. He didn't ask what happened, didn't say, "I told you so." He just sat down on the tile floor next to me and held me while I cried, letting the raw grief wash over me. The next morning, Noah staged a full intervention. He invited our friend Mia, who had witnessed the drama, over, and the two of them sat on my couch, looking serious and exhausted. "We can't keep doing this, Trav," Noah started, his voice firm but kind. "You've been obsessively focused on Chloe for months in a way that is profoundly unhealthy. It's affecting every single part of your life." Maya nodded, her eyes full of concern. "The friend group has been worried sick. We watched you weaponize Sarah. We watched you create tension at every social gathering. We didn't know how to call it out without seeming unsupportive, but it had to stop." Noah added, "This behavior isn't who you are. We miss our friend who had interests beyond making one person regret their choices. You need to actually deal with the real hurt, not perform revenge." They mentioned that my mentor, Dr. Cooper, had even called Noah when I didn't show up for a meeting, because I'd been sitting in my car outside Chloe's apartment building. I didn't even remember missing that meeting. The realization that my obsession had progressed to that point, affecting my reliability, hit me with a fresh wave of shame. I sat there utterly exposed, accepting that everything they said was true. That afternoon, I texted Sarah asking to meet. When we got coffee the next day, I didn't try to defend myself. I apologized with complete honesty. I used you, Sarah, I confessed, barely meeting her eyes. I didn't see you as a real person with feelings beyond how you made Chloe jealous. I need you to know that I recognize what I did was wrong and manipulative. You deserved so much better than being a prop in my revenge fantasy. I am genuinely sorry for the hurt I caused you while claiming to be the victim. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said she appreciated the apology more than I could know. Have you figured out what you actually want yet, Travis, or are you still stuck on Chloe? She asked. I swallowed hard, forcing the truth out.
I don't know, Sarah.
I honestly don't know yet. She nodded. I respect that you're being real now. She said maybe we could be friends eventually, but she needed time, and she walked out, leaving me to face the emptiness I had created. I got home to find a letter in my mailbox handwritten, my name on the envelope in Chloe's messy, familiar scrawl. I sat in my car for 20 minutes just staring at it. When I finally opened it, it was 4 pages long, the handwriting getting messier as she went. She wrote that she'd panicked when I confessed, because she was genuinely scared of losing me as a friend. And she'd convinced herself that rejection was safer than risking the most important relationship in her life. She explained that she had been in therapy for 6 weeks, trying to understand why she constantly sabotaged emotional closeness. Her therapist had helped her realize she had serious problems with emotional vulnerability that went back to her parents' messy divorce when she was 12. The letter said she knew now that laughing at me was the cruelest possible response to someone she actually cared about deeply. She wrote that she'd been replaying that moment for months, seeing my face when she laughed, and she understood why I hated her. She didn't expect me to forgive her, but she needed me to know that her rejection had nothing to do with me and everything to do with her own fear of being vulnerable with someone who actually mattered. I read the letter 8 times. Part of me still wanted to throw it away, to cling to the simple anger. But another part of me recognized something real in her words, something vulnerable that felt completely different from her desperate texts. For the first time, I felt a flicker of something other than spite, complicated, messy, inconvenient empathy. The pain of the breakdown was real, but it was nothing compared to the quiet, terrifying difficulty of honest amends. After my honest apology to Sarah and the devastating intervention from Noah and Mia, I knew I couldn't hide behind anger or performance any longer. The first step was swallowing my pride and reaching out to the friends I'd alienated. I called Luke first. I told him I was sorry for making him uncomfortable, for weaponizing Sarah, and for forcing people to watch my toxic drama play out. I admitted I deliberately created tension and forced people to take sides. Luke was still clearly frustrated, but he appreciated the apology, admitting he'd been worried about me but didn't know how to speak up. I called Maya next and apologized for turning her birthday into a miserable event. She said she was glad I was finally being real about what happened, instead of playing the victim while actively hurting people. I extended similar apologies to my roommate Noah and friend Mia, acknowledging the damage I had done to our social fabric. Then came the meeting with Chloe. Tuesday afternoon, I met her at the cafe near her office, a neutral spot we rarely went to. We sat across from each other in a back booth, and the silence was heavy, but different now. It was the weight of unspoken truth, not unexpressed rage. We had the most honest conversation we had ever had in the 5 years we had known each other. She told me about starting therapy, about working through her attachment issues and her deep-seated fear of being abandoned, which stemmed from her parents' traumatic divorce when she was 12. She explained how her panic response, the laughter, was a desperate, involuntary way to reject me before I could risk leaving her. I listened, absorbing the pain she was finally sharing. Then, I admitted my side. I confessed that I had weaponized Sarah specifically to hurt her. I used social situations to make her jealous. I was cruel on purpose because I wanted her to feel as bad as she had made me feel. We both sat with the uncomfortable truth. We had been best friends who didn't actually know how to be emotionally honest about anything that truly mattered. We had spent years being close, but never truly vulnerable. Our friendship had been a comfort zone, a shield against the real risks of honesty and romance. "I'm sorry, Travis," she said, tears welling up as she spoke. "I am profoundly sorry for how I handled everything." "I'm sorry, too, Loy," I replied. "I'm sorry I let my hurt turn me into someone who deliberately used another person to get revenge. That was manipulative, and I destroyed something good." We agreed we had hurt each other badly, and maybe that meant we couldn't go back to the toxic closeness we had before. We needed space to figure out who we were without the emotional dishonesty. She needed to work on her fear of vulnerability before she could have any real relationship. I needed to figure out who I was when I wasn't performing for someone else's approval or trying to make someone regret losing me. We agreed to check in maybe once a month, just a quick text. But the constant daily contact had to end. There was real grief in accepting that some friendships don't survive honesty, but there was also immense relief in finally telling the truth instead of pretending. 2 weeks later, Sarah texted, asking to meet again. We got coffee at a different place this time. She said she'd noticed me doing the hard work, making apologies, and focusing on my job. She was willing to try dating again for real, if I could promise to be present and honest. We acknowledged that the first version of our relationship had been built on performance and revenge. "I can't promise I have everything figured out," I told her honestly, "but I promise I want to try for real this time, with clear communication and genuine emotional investment." She smiled a real, unreserved smile. "That's enough for now, Travis." We agreed to take things slow and actually get to know each other without Chloe's shadow hanging over us. 4 months after the party where I had laughed in Chloe's face, I was sitting in Dr. Anderson's office talking about why I had spent so much energy on revenge instead of processing the hurt and moving on. She helped me see that I'd been seeking validation through making Chloe regret her choices, because I didn't actually believe I was worth wanting, unless someone else confirmed it through their suffering. Sarah and I were dating, taking things slow, and actually communicating about our feelings. I'd deleted the manufactured couples photos from the revenge era, focusing on building something honest. I had thrown myself back into work, gotten the second promotion my mentor had mentioned, and started rock climbing on weekends, a pursuit entirely my own, unconnected to my emotional drama. Some days were still hard. I'd catch myself wanting to check Chloe's social media or engineer a situation where she'd see me looking happy, and I'd have to actively choose something different instead. She kept reminding me that growth wasn't one dramatic moment where everything suddenly clicked, but an ongoing, messy process of catching myself falling into old patterns and choosing a better, more vulnerable path. I had lost a best friend, but in the wreckage of the fallout, I had finally found the courage to be honest with myself. That was a victory no amount of revenge could ever have bought.